unions in South Carolina? What is the union stronghold there?
No, fortunately, we are not a union state. However, we do have associations, and while they are not unions, they're still pretty powerful. You know, we've got the School Boards Association, the School Administrators Association, the School Teachers Association, the Education Association, which is affiliated with the NEA. So all of these associations, they are the ones that are well-funded and typically fighting against us. And then, of course, now we have the Chamber of Commerce that's typically, you know, of course, they're pro-Common Core in our state. And, you know, they've fallen for this whole workforce development model of education because they've got a seat at the table and they've been promised things by the federal government in exchange for their participation. So, you know, that's another piece that the federal government has in this is that they developed, along with the school-to-work law that was passed back in the early 90s, they developed something called workforce development boards that are regional, where local industry sits on a board with the local education officials, and they decide what jobs are going to be needed in the next 20 years in that region, and then they funnel those jobs into the local school districts, and then schools are trying to funnel students into those jobs. So I don't know how it works in Texas, but in South Carolina, for example, at very young ages, they're surveying children and trying to figure out what jobs they should have in the future, and they start pigeonholing them as young as 6th grade into these career fields, very limited career fields, of course. And so that's the whole workforce development model and that the Chamber of Commerce has bought into. And it's an attempt of the federal government to control the economy instead of allowing a free market system. So, you know, the point that you made earlier about people that have been sort of asleep at the wheel on this, and even legislators, is that it is absolutely true, and it's vital that they wake up and understand what's happening. Because from what I just described, this is critical. I don't think people understand that it's been through our public education system, through this indoctrination and this workforce development model, that the progressives are effectively changing our country from within through the minds of our children and through, you know, this workforce development model of trying to control the economy, which, you know, is what was tried and failed in Europe. We know that's not going to work, and then we know that that's not the form of government that our founding fathers, created for us. So that's the scariest part. So when I talk to people, you know, quite often they're older audiences, and I'll tell them, you know, even if you don't have kids in school, you are a stakeholder in this.
Right.
Because first of all, more than half or nearly half of our state budget and a third of our federal budget goes to education, public education. So most of our tax dollars are funding public education. So that's the first reason you're a stakeholder. The second reason is because of what I just described, and it's what Abraham Lincoln said, is that the philosophy of the classroom of one generation is the philosophy of government of the next. So what's happening in the public education system, they need to be aware of, and they need to be helping us fight it, because otherwise we are going to lose our constitutional republic, and we don't have much time to reverse the trend.
Well, it is so fascinating. What you just described is exactly what we have in Texas. We have the Texas Association of School Administrators, Texas Association of School Board, and then we have these 20 education service centers that service our districts. That's who has the power and is bringing all of this into our school districts. What's interesting is, and we've got a lot of listeners from Texas, and right now we are in a runoff election for the lieutenant governor position. the lieutenant governor in the state of Texas is the most powerful position in the state. One of those candidates, Senator Dan Patrick, has been, one of his first major endorsements out of the box was Mike Huckabee, who should give people pause because Mike Huckabee has been for the Common Core standards and for rebranding the Common Core.
Yes, he's the one we can blame for all the states doing the rebranding. That was exactly what he instructed them to do.
Exactly. And when you look at, people need to understand, and grassroots Tea Party activists across the state of Texas must understand, this issue of education is the defining issue, I believe, of our nation. If we don't stop this now, we are in major trouble. And Senator Dan Patrick was the sponsor of HB 5. HB 5 implemented what Sherry Few just described as the takeover of our education system, where our children are being funneled into the workforce. And our friend Mary Bowen spoke, and I want you to hear what she has to say because she pretty much lays out what Common Core is in a nutshell. So Josh, our producer, let's go.
There was a document called the 2020 Vision, the Education Roadmap. And the most important thing about this document is that it was spelled out very clearly that the goal was to essentially do away with the elected school boards in local districts. Linda Darling Hammond, who you heard Alice talk about, and Bill Ayers are very good friends. Bill Ayers is, of course, a radical. These are some of his quotes. Teaching urges revolutions, small and large. Education is the motor force of revolution. And if this isn't startling and dramatic, this is where these people's heads are at, folks. They see the schools as a tool to fundamentally transform society. And they desire that children leaving the schools don't identify themselves as living in a particular town. In other words, they're not from Katy, Texas. They don't identify, they're not a Boy Scout or a Catholic. They're a global citizen. When Common Core and its evil twin sister, C-Scope, came into the Texas schools, the Texas Education Agency published a document telling you what they were doing. And they said that if there is a curriculum that is common, and you can call that, you can call that Common Core if you want to, that if that is put in with unconditional delivery, that means people don't have a choice anymore, that this is the only way to ensure educational equity amongst students. And so what this is doing is it's driving a factory model of our educational system where all the children come in and they get on this sort of conveyor belt. And when they pop off the other side of the conveyor belt, they're all equal. There's only one big problem with this business model of education is it's un-American. Because here in this country, when you go to school, it's a door of opportunity. You can walk through the door and you can take the opportunity. You can make a success of yourself. But we're supposed to have freedom. And we can't have freedom without free will. And part of free will is I walk through the door and I don't pick up the opportunity. I choose either to fail or I choose a road of success that looks different than what you might design for me. Because in this country, we forge our own path. So how can somebody make decisions for me before I even arrive at the school about what success is going to look like for me and when I pop out the other side of the conveyor belt?